So you're probably fed up with me at this stage talking about doing nothing in meditation. Am I right? Okay, okay. And it struck me that I haven't actually explained it properly. So I'm going to another go. So, how is doing nothing in meditation different from how we normally are with our mind? That's the question. How is it different? Is it different from simply allowing the flow of thoughts? You might misunderstand what I'm saying when I say that meditation is about doing nothing. So you might just think that means, you just let your thoughts flow, Now, it's a little subtle. So, when you're doing nothing, it really, really means doing nothing, right? So, there's obvious things. You don't block your thoughts. That would be doing something, right? You don't follow after your thoughts. That would be doing something. But the really critical one is you don't evaluate your thoughts as they occur. That's the key. Basically, you just rest in this carefree simplicity. You don't evaluate. That's doing nothing. That's a really important point. So you might ask the question then, if our habit is always to do, to change, to evaluate, to take positions, to accept and reject, our habit is very strong. If that's what our normal way of being is, how can you do nothing? Your habit is to do something. It's very simple. When you find yourself doing something, right, in your mind, when you find yourself doing something with your thoughts, you simply release yourself. You just release. You just release yourself into being present. And then you get caught up again. So you keep releasing yourself into the present again and again and again. And what that does is, for you, it normalizes being present. It makes it more normal just to be present. So, again, with meditation, you don't make progress through effort. But that doesn't mean you do nothing. You have to apply yourself. There's no effort involved, but you have to apply yourself repeatedly. And the last thing to say is that we only have 5 minutes for this, but anyway, I think these are really important points. That when you're at the beginning, when the stream of thoughts is very fast, it's much more difficult. And so the method is simply to refocus and become present by listening to sound, by feeling your breath, by seeing what's around you. You can see what's happening in your mind. I have no idea. You need to see, and evaluate is the wrong word. You need to see what's going on in your mind. And if your mind is very busy, then you apply the method. But don't get stuck there. Don't get stuck. Release again. Release yourself and just do nothing. Okay? So we got 5 minutes to try that out. Okay? Okay. I'll just highlight you there, honey.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
That was really nice. I feel like throwing out all my script. But I was just going to look at the meaning of grasping and how the meaning kind of came through when I really got to feel what grasping feels like. And I'll be referring to things that Mingyur Rinpoche said because I find them very helpful. And there's kind of one level that we can know things at, you know. A bit like Sybil Fawlty in Fawlty Towers. We can go, oh, I know. We can kind of bore ourselves silly thinking we know stuff, but also are hearing other people say that they know stuff. And we can go on kind of listening and maybe hearing the teachings, but to actually kind of take them on board in a way that we can put them into service is a thing. And Mingyur says, accepting things like impermanence intellectually is the easy part. Putting it into service is different. How to put it into service. And he says things like he knew he was not the Rinpoche label, you know. But he had thought that all of these ideas about him, about who he was, would drop away when he left the monastery. And it took him a little while. He said he hadn't known the extent to which these things had taken up residence in his body, like how strongly those feelings or identities or, I don't know what you can call them, grasping in his case or not, but the kind of identification with things. And he thought they could be discarded more easily than they could be because they were nothing but ideas. Well, how the whole feeling of grasping became clear to me, and how, in fact, the meaning of grasping became clear to me, was, some of you are probably familiar with this story already. It's where I wanted to go and have a gossip about somebody at work. And it involved going through a couple of doors and around a quadrangle kind of thing, going over to the other person. I'd arranged to meet this other person, all right, and have a chat. And my intention was to speak ill of somebody. I had come across a good story that I wanted to relay. But on my way over, I started to kind of reflect on how kind of entrapped I felt and how juicy this story had become for me. And how on the one hand, it felt very, very attractive. But on the other hand, it wasn't nice. You know, I got a real feeling of how strong these things are, how the grasping actually is. And I decided not to gossip, not to speak ill of the person. I spoke well of them instead. So I just wonder, what does grasping feel like for you? Do you have a sense of what grasping feels like? Can you think of something that you grasp at? It could be pleasant, something pleasant or unpleasant. And just consider for a moment what that feels like for you. This is so you connect with your own experience of grasping. Does it feel calming or exciting? Does it feel pleasant or unpleasant? Now, it's kind of heartening because Mingyur Rinpoche, he talks about all of these ideas that we have about ourselves, you know, about his robes, his identity, that they're fabricated, they're constructed, they're not inherent. And because they're made up like that, they can be transformed. But his discovery was that it was going to take a bit more work, you know, and more time and more patience than he had foreseen. And he said it couldn't be just made to stop functioning by volition, by wishing it, by taking off like a sun hat in the shade. So I wonder if we have expectations of practice or of ourselves, having come in touch with these teachings, whether we think we're going to change very quickly. And what's happening for us in that regard? Do we actually, how do we feel about ourselves in this whole process? Are we patient? And Minger said that he had expected his life, or he had expected to die to his old life overnight. You know, that was just happened just like that. But he was beginning to understand that he was slowly inhabiting a new form. And for me, some of the changes we go through, they're a bit like, you know, the way a tadpole changes into a frog. Our brains are a little bit the same. We're kind of stuck on going in the same pathways. You know, so we need to, our brain does make new connections. That's what makes change possible. So we need to make new connections. And just how do we do this? It's through practice. That's why it's called practice. You know, like Martin was talking about, doing nothing. How did you explain it? Coming into releasing yourself into presence. When you get stuck or involved in thinking or in thoughts, just release yourself into presence. And this is something you can do anytime. There's a saying, meditation is not. Getting used to is. So we're not kind of doing something with meditation. We're just getting used to doing nothing, being present. So we try that for a minute. Just be present. If mind is busy, if you remember, just release into presence. Or apply a method like the listening to sound. And one of the things that Minger said that I find really helpful as well too, he said that he didn't have to travel with the nostalgia or with any memory clouds. Just stay steady and let them pass through. that might be something you've become familiar with through your own practice, is that thoughts come and go. So he just stayed with whatever objects came to mind long enough to allow the feelings to move on. And he said, with no stories attached to their associations, they didn't hang around for long. So whatever objects came to mind, whatever nostalgia or memory clouds might have come in, without the stories attached to them, they didn't hang around for long. And I found it very interesting because he says he's working on it. He's not trying to push his old self away. So he's actually being very kind with himself. And he says things will change. Let it be. Let it pass. So coming back to knowing about things, like we might know something in our minds and think, oh, I should be like that, or they should be like that. But we can be kind with ourselves, because as we release more into presence, we're getting to know more who we really are. Not the stories, not the grasping, not the ideas or concepts we have about ourselves. And Minger says as well, of course your mind will stray. It'll get caught, hooked. You'll be distracted by sights and sounds. Your mental composure will fall apart and come together again. That's how it works. But if you can accept whatever happens, good, bad, or indifferent, that is the best practice. If you can accept whatever happens, good, bad, or indifferent, that is the best practice. So I'm kind of wondering, and Morris and Mary and ourselves were chatting as well, and we were wondering, are you finding that not reacting is becoming easier for you? You know, is your tendency to react becoming less kind of sticky or less kind of obnoxious or less kind of immediate and urgent? Because it's really good to kind of get a feeling for how you're doing and to kind of acknowledge that progress is being made in the sense of not being kind of stuck with things like you used to be before. And the idea here is that we're kind to ourselves, not kind of beating ourselves up all the time. And the same applies to others as well. When Martin and myself first started to get into these teachings, we used to kind of complain to the others that they weren't doing as well as we thought they should be. But in actual fact, it was our own behaviour that was at fault. So be gentle with others too, please. I'm sure Martin will remind me, won't you? So thank you very much, and you can head off and chat in your groups.